With the ongoing releases of the new chapter-specific combat patrols and their updated detachments coming alongside them, we have now been able to see the Imperial Fists who are being led into battle by a brand new Lysander model, and we have not only seen his updated rules, but also the rules that you can use for your Imperial Fists in their own specific detachment. Like we saw with the Salamanders recently, this is essentially a slightly updated, amended detachment from the main Marine Codex. Unfortunately for the Imperial Fists though, this one looks to be based on the 1st Company Task Force detachment, which is arguably one of the worst detachments that the Marines have access to, and so even with some amendments and changes and updates, it probably isn't going to be all that amazing. First up though, we'll have a look at Lysander himself. He, as far as I can see anyway, still costs the same 100 points that he does right now, and in terms of his profile itself, he actually hasn't changed all that much. He's still a 5-inch move, toughness 5, 2-up save, 4-up invuln model. He has gained a wound though, he's gone up to 7, which is really nice. It means that those d6 damage attacks now physically can't one-shot him anymore, and also gives him just that extra bit of durability. Things like d6 plus 1 damage las cannons now need to roll perfectly to actually take him out if they have precision or he's by himself. He does still have deep strike, and he can still join Terminators as you would expect. He's still got his melee weapon, the Thunderhammer, the Fist of Dawn, which is actually super good. It's 5 attacks at strength 10, minus 3 AP, 3 damage and dev wounds, and it does get even better in the new detachment, as we will see in just a second. So he really is this pure melee beatstick. He's got no shooting attacks, he is just pure close combat. However, on top of that, he does also bring some fairly nice defensive buffs for his unit. He has 2 rules. Icon of Obstinacy still gives you that semi-transhuman physiology rule. It reduces the wound roll of an enemy attack by 1 if it is a higher strength than your toughness, which is really good on Terminators. Also, interestingly, the wording has been slightly amended, and I may be wrong here, someone correct me if I am, but to me, this rule now reads that he does get that -1 to be wounded all the time, not just when he's leading a unit, because it now doesn't say when this model is leading a unit, it is just when an attack targets this model's unit. And surely, I might not be completely up to date on the rules, but surely this model is his own unit. So when an attack targets this model's unit, that does count if they are just targeting Lysander all by himself. So again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the wording of this seems to imply that even if his bodyguard unit is dead or you are running him by himself, he may still get that -1 to be wounded if the strength of the attack is higher than his toughness. On top of that, he does also get a bit more durable against precision attacks or when his bodyguard unit has been destroyed, because he also has the rule Rampart. This gives you a once per battle ability to gain, for a phase, a 2-up invulnerable save. So that means in a turn when you are charged by an Avatar of Cain or a Greater Demon or an Imperial Knight, you can activate this and you will have a much better chance of actually surviving. So he's not bad. If he is still 100 points, he is a bit pricey, but certainly he is able to hit stuff very hard, and he can make a unit of Terminators pretty damn tanky actually. I would say compared to other Terminator characters, like Belial, he is just much better, even at the higher cost. If you compare him to something like the new Arjak from the Space Wolves, I would arguably take Arjak instead, but that's mainly because you put him with the Space Wolf Terminators who have that -1 to be wounded ability as part of their datasheet, so he kind of gets a lot from that. I think he's maybe not quite as good as Arjak overall, but he's definitely better than Belial, and he isn't bad, I don't think. If you want a pure melee beatstick, he can do that fairly well. The last thing to note about him is that it does also look like he's lost an ability as well. He used to have the rule Inspiring Commander, and this does look to be gone. This gave your Terminator and your Assault Terminator units OC2 when Lysander was on the battlefield, which is actually quite a big loss. That was really useful on them, so I think it's going to be a shame if it is gone, because that was a great way, honestly, to help you keep playing the objective game and playing for those primary points, even if you were running a Terminator heavy list, because they, of course, struggle with that flat OC1 that they have when you are trying to score objectives. But overall, I do think he is okay. The Detachment, however, that does have some issues. As I said, it is based on the First Company Task Force, but it does have some slight adjustments and a few different strats and enhancements. The main rule of the Detachment is no longer extremist level threat, instead you get a rule called Wrath of Dawn. And this has gone from being a once per game reroll wound rolls against your Oath target to a constant ability where any unit from your army can reroll wound rolls of 1 against your Oath target, but the unit you have with Lysander in, if you are taking him, they get full rerolls against your Oath target. So it is still very specific against your Oath of Moment target, but it's no longer once per battle, so it is actually quite a lot better, I think. It's also worth noting that in this detachment you will still get the +1 to wound against Oath targets because you can't bring any Dark Angel, Blood Angel or Space Wolf units, so you will still unlock that bonus as well. So you can get units that are +1 to wound and re-rolling wound rolls of 1 against your Oath target, or in Lysander's case, +1 to wound and re-rolling all wound rolls, which can make it very, very scary against your Oath target. In terms of the output you can expect, Lysander alone with this buff up, so going into your Oath of Moment target, he will do around 9 damage to an Imperial Knight, or against something like a toughness 10, 3-up save vehicle like a Gladiator, he can quite easily get up to the full 12 damage into it. He's got something like a 64-65% chance to just one-shot a Gladiator tank. So this detachment really can juice him up, and even into something tough like Custodian Guard, he will on average kill about 3 of them by himself, so he really can be a nice potent little beat stick in this detachment, and that's before you even consider that the Terminators that he will likely be going around with. As I said, to me it definitely feels better than the First Company Task Force, but I am still not sure it is enough to beat some of the other detachments you have. Reroll wound rolls of 1 against your Oath target is decent, but certainly I don't think it's as useful as the buffs you get from, say, the Gladius or even the Stormlance. On the enhancement front, you do keep the Imperium Sword, which is renamed as Champions of the Feast for the +1 attack on the bearer, and then the once per battle +1 attack for the bearer's unit. You also keep Rites of War. This comes back as Disciple of Rhetoricus. This gives a Terminator model +1 OC, and then a once per battle +1 OC to the bearer's unit, which is kind of meh. Like, the Champion of the Feast seems fairly good, but the Disciple of Rhetoricus, I mean, it could come in handy sometimes, but it's really not the most exciting enhancement. The 2 new ones are Indomitable Champion. This grants a Terminator model the chance to come back after it's been destroyed, so you roll a d6 and on a 2+ you put the bearer back on the battlefield near to where they were destroyed with 3 wounds left. That's always nice. It could be solid on a Terminator Chaplain or a Terminator Captain that you want back to charge into another combat and maybe kill whatever killed him. The other option is the Maladraxian Standard. This goes on an Ancient, and it gives the bearer and his unit the Transhuman ability again, meaning enemy attacks are at -1 to wound if they are a higher strength than your toughness. This is a really, really good buff, especially on an Ancient. You can put this on things like your Blade Guard veterans or your Stern Guard veterans. You can even put it on a Terminator Ancient and put it with some Terminators, so you could, in theory, have 2 10-man blobs of Terminators, both with that buff on, one with the Ancient and this enhancement, the other with Lysander, so you can make a really quite tanky little force from some of the enhancements in this detachment. Also featuring some reused abilities and rules is the Stratagems. Armor of Contempt of course returns for 1 command point, but then we also get Wrathful Conquerors, which is the renamed version of Duty and Honor. This still gives a Terminator, Blade Guard, Stern Guard, or Veteran Squad, or Vanguard Veteran Squad even, the ability to sticky an objective for a command point. It's kind of meh because you play Marines, you could very easily just bring a unit of Intercessors if you wanted sticky objectives in your army, but if you are running a pure veteran list, and you have a load of Terminators or Stern Guard or whatever, this could be useful just to help you keep hold of objectives as you move the rest of your units up the board. Fury of the First is a shooting or a fight phase stratagem. Again, this goes on a Terminator, Stern Guard, Vanguard, or Blade Guard unit. It gives the unit +1 to hit and +1 to wound if they are below starting strength. So a fairly nice couple of buffs. The +1 to wound triggering when you've just lost one model or are just below starting strength is actually quite nice, I think. Sometimes we see this kind of stratagem and it needs you to be below half strength to get that +1 to wound. So that is quite nice. Obviously, it's made a little bit worse because you can still get +1 to wound against your oath target for being the Marines, but still it's a fairly nice stratagem. And if you want to get more hits and more wounds into a key target, this can be a great way to do that. Next up, we have Disciplined Exterminator. This is a new one. In your shooting phase, a Terminator or veteran unit gains ignores cover and +1 AP. This, of course, is really good on shooter units like Stern Guard, but even on things like Terminators with their Storm Bolters, this could make them a lot better. A unit of Terminators can be getting +1 AP with this stratagem, but also potentially +1 to wound and re-roll wounds against your oath target if you're with Lysander. And this stratagem actually lets 10 Terminators firing Storm Bolters throw out 40 shots, and if they are being led by Lysander, that nets you about 10 unsaved wounds into Custodian Guard, so you will kill off 3 of them and wound another. And I mean, yes, that's a very expensive unit to do that. I'm not saying that's the most points efficient use of them, but Storm Bolters being able to do that much damage into Custodian Guard does show the level of sort of buffs and boosts that you can give some of your attacks in this detachment. You also get Obdurate Vengeance. This is a fight phase stratagem that gives a Terminator or a veteran unit the ability to fight on death. So far, this is fairly similar to what we've seen before, but this version is on a 3+. We normally see this on a 4+, so this is going to be absolutely amazing for your Vanguard, your Blade Guard, or your Terminators. It is going to be brutally good. Having that really quite reliable chance to get to swing back, even if you get charged by a scary enemy melee unit, is incredibly strong. And you can get a solid 6 or 7 Terminators fighting back, even if the entire unit gets wiped out by, say, an Imperial Knight or Scarbrand. So you can do a really good bit of work back into those units and maybe even kill them in return. So for just 1 command point, it's definitely a good one to keep in your back pocket for those unfortunate situations where you do get charged by a big, scary enemy. The final one is Dropship Extraction. This essentially replaces Orbital Teleportarium. It gives a Terminator unit some uppy-downy tricks. So it lets you put them into reserves at the end of the enemy fight phase, so you can then bring them back down in your following movement phase to be a nuisance or get on the other side of the battlefield to an objective you need, or just to get round or get away from a scary enemy that is bearing down on you. It is just a nice utility tool to get some Terminators around the board a bit quicker than they otherwise could. So I would say overall there are some strats with teeth here. It does have some okay enhancements. The detachment rule I think is better than the one you get in the First Company Task Force. It certainly can improve your output against your oath target quite significantly. I don't think it's as good as a lot of your other detachments that as a Marine you have access to. I don't think you will get as much running this in an Imperial Fist army as, say, the Salamanders would from their Forge Fathers Seekers detachment that we saw the other week. So it's okay, it's just not as good as I think you would get from a lot of the other detachments that you can choose. So I really don't think we will see it all that often when you are seeing Marines in sort of any kind of competitive sense. But for sheer fluffy and sort of fun games, I think it could be really cool having that really good output against your oath target. Having Lysander, having maybe a couple of Terminator units that are super tanky is really cool. And I think the name of it as well, the Emperor's Shield, certainly fits that theme and fits that aesthetic quite well. As always though, I'd love to know what you think. Will you be giving this detachment a try with your Imperial Fists? And how do you think it stacks up compared to the First Company Task Force that it seems to be based off? Let me know down in the comments below what you think, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later guys.